What are the steps to strip and refinish a floor? There's a lot going on here, so pay attention. First of all, clear the room of all furniture, anything that moves, any place that you're going to lay the stripper and re-wax needs to have no furniture whatsoever in place. Secondly, I always want to sweep that area, pick up whatever dry dirt there is, because that's important. The next would be preparations, and the first and most important thing is you need SPPs. You need safety protection devices. You should have safety glasses, gloves for sure. When you're stripping a floor, it's extremely slippery, and so you can get little booties you can put on that have little skid plates so that it's not as slippery for you. So SPPs are very important. The next step you need to do is prepare your tools. What do you need? You need a bucket to hold the stripper. You need a mop for the stripper. This is the rotten cotton string mop put it in the stripper. You need a separate bucket for rinsing the floor and separate rinse mops. Another important thing to show you is you need all the tools. You need a scraper. There's always a time when you really have to do some extra scraping. In addition, for edges and corners and special spots, you need a doodle bug. So this doodle has a stripper pad on it, and you manually go into the corners where the machine is round and might not get. So these are two important tools to use when you're stripping a floor. When it comes to the stripper, there are so many strippers out there. It's important that you read the directions and prepare the stripper per the manufacturer's instructions on that canister of stripper. We check the directions, and it is 1 quart to 2 gallons of water. If the water's too hot, you can flash the chemicals out into the atmosphere and the stripper won't work as well. So cool to lukewarm, once again, follow the instructions that are on the container. So you need to mix that appropriately, put your stripper mop into that solution. I would say most stripping mops we would call the old-fashioned rotten cotton mops. It's a mop that you don't feel any pangs about throwing it away when you're done. When it comes to applying the stripper, a lot of stripper on the floor. You want to flood the floor with the stripper, and I would say you don't want to do a massive area at once. Do it section by section, but you flood that floor. You do not want the floor to dry out while the stripper is doing its job. The next most important thing is dwell time. Let the stripper sit there for as long as the instructions on the container say. It's usually 7 to 10 minutes, somewhere in there. The stripper has done its job. At that point, you get a swing machine. You need a stripping pad, which would be a black pad. 2 options. Number 1 would be a high productivity pad, which will cut into that wax a little better. And the second one is the normal old-fashioned, 1-inch thick stripping pad. They will both work well. I also recommend a water tank on the machine, because if the floor starts to dry out, then you can add water as you're scrubbing and removing the finish, and that way the floor doesn't dry out. The most important thing I can tell you is never be standing in the stripper solution when you start that machine. Always be standing outside on dry surface, so that when you start that machine and all the torque of that machine, you won't end up laying on your side in the stripper. It is very slippery, like worse than an ice rink. So you start outside on dry surface, and then you move into the stripper area, move back and forth thoroughly over the entire area. And when you feel you have removed all that stripper, and now you have this thick slurry of stripper and wax on the floor, the next most important thing is to vacuum it up. So you need a good wet dry vacuum. The best wet vacuum would have a front mount squeegee. Once again, starting on the dry, move into the area you're stripping the wax off and completely go through that area, suck up all that stripper. So there was wax on the baseboard, and I used the Doodle scrubber to scrub that off. I'm going to take my scraper and I'm going to scrape these very edges. Make sure I got everything up. Beautiful. There's no wax left on this floor. It's exactly what I wanted. If you're going to do this job, you want to do it right. At this point, you can notice if there are still any shiny spots where maybe all the wax didn't come off the floor. To do the job properly, lay some more stripper on those areas, let it sit, make sure you get all of the stripper up so the entire floor is matte. There's no shine anywhere. Once you have possibly re-stripped it, re-sucked it up with the wet vacuum, the next thing you need to do is rinse that floor. Generally once or twice. I know there's some finishes out there that say it's a rinse-free finish. I still recommend you always rinse the floor thoroughly. Once or twice. Now the floor needs to dry completely. Once you have stripped the floor, you have wet vacked it, you have rinsed the floor must completely dry. At that point, I would recommend a floor fan. You can blow it on it, and it must really be thoroughly dry before you apply your finish. Go to the far corner where the air doesn't move. If that's really nice and dry, you're probably ready to go with the wax. All right, so here we go. Once again, we're pouring over the top into here. It is no glugging. No dripping. It's a great way to go. And so a flat mop system has a special bucket, and you have a special flat mop, and you go around, first of all, the edges, and then you fill in back and forth with the flat mop. As it starts to dry, you reload that flat mop, let it wring down a little bit, and then continue on. And it's a quick way to lay finish, and it's not going to leave waves or mop strings in any way. Once you've laid your first coat of finish, you need to wait. You have to be patient, and sometimes that first coat takes longer to dry, and it might be 30 minutes, 45 minutes, as long as it takes. And I like to take a sheet of paper, drop that sheet of paper, and see if that paper sort of floats across the floor. Then I feel like it's safe to walk maybe and test to be sure, even in the far recesses of the room, that it's fully dry. If you start to apply a second coat of finish before the first is really dry, you will lift off some of the material that leaves the floor shiny. You'll lift that off, and forever you'll have a little spot that's duller than the rest of the floor. So patience is important. The next most important thing is how many coats of wax do I put on the floor? And that's really important. Thin coats, not thick coats, but thin coats, and probably the maximum you can do per day would be 4 coats. If you do more than 4 coats, it's too much to cure overnight. If you feel you want, you're in a situation, a really high traffic area, and you want maybe 8 coats of wax on that floor, that's perfectly fine, because the next day you can quickly clean your floor and you'll be able to add 4 more coats. It's critical to not go beyond 4 coats in a 24-hour period. We're not done yet, because many people put a burnisher on new wax too soon. So it's critical to wait a minimum of 24 hours before you put any mechanized machine on that floor. Better yet, 48 hours is ideal. The floor will have cured enough that the burnisher will definitely pop the shine, but won't abrade the finish in any way. Final thing we can talk about is, when do you put the furniture back? And believe it or not, 5 to 6 days is what the experts say. If you waited 5 to 6 days and then you drag a table across or a chair or whatever you're doing, that floor will be crystal hard and not scratched. I know 6 days is not practical, so most people add furniture within 24 hours. Just be very careful, lift it into place, don't be dragging it around, and you should be fine. Thanks for watching. Like us and subscribe. Leave a comment with a question, and we may do a video about that in the future.